Life doesn't stop while on vacation. Neither do medical issues, accidents, or worse. We are going to ask the questions others won't, so you can protect yourself and your family.
Hey everybody, my name is John Chow of Cruise Addicts. So glad to have you here. We're going to be talking about something really most people have not either heard of, don't realize it's actually an issue, but it's actually sexual assault and accountability and how the cruise lines investigate, or maybe they don't. We're going to have our expert attorney, Tom Scolaro. I want to give you an intro to Tom. Tom's legal career spans over 25 years, and he is the founding partner of Scolaro Law in Miami, which specializes in personal injury and has handled many high-profile cruise and maritime cases. We're going to get Tom in here, and he's going to really bring us up to speed and explain a lot of things that we really don't know much about. This is one of those little shadowy little things that people don't realize actually happens. We hope it's rare, but we're gonna get do a deep dive here and find out much more. We'll get Tom here. Hi, Tom. How are you today?
Good. Good afternoon, John. How you doing?
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time and actually going to bring this topic to light. One thing that's been surprising since we've actually had a chance to talk more and more about this, about the legal aspects of maritime and cruise law, is you've said it more than once that some of the top cases that you actually deal with is actually sexual assault. Is that true?
Yeah. Unfortunately, that is one of the common types of claims that we see on cruise vessels, and in our practice, that is a substantial amount of the work that we do, and honestly, one of the most unfortunate things that we get involved with, because you're dealing with people's lives who their entire sense of being and sense of security is shattered when they're on a vacation, right? The absolute sort of worst timing of these things, when defenses are down and they're not really thinking about watching my rear. It's just it's unfortunate.
What do people need to understand about sexual assault when it comes to cruise ships?
Well, a lot. There's let's talk about this sort of thing globally, right? You go on a cruise and you're somewhat aware of some of the maybe normal risks that could be had. You watch where you're walking, watch where you're going. You don't think about, all right, well, am I at risk for being sexually assaulted? Because you don't hear about it. That is not something that is publicized at all. It's one of the things that they don't talk about. It's one of the things that gets very little reporting. And a lot of the times they try and, sweep it under the rug, or, change the narrative where, it's your fault, or it's consensual, or it's alcohol induced. And, then there's a lot of that shame. So there's just a lot of it that occurs, but so much that is underreported, right? I mean, that's first and foremost, is that the numbers are underreported. Look, the numbers are significant in and of themselves. I mean, just this year in Q1 of 2025, self-reported, okay? So let's call that for what it is. Self-reported, there's 48 instances so far that are reported, 23 rapes and 10 sexual assaults, which marks a 2-year high. So this trend is growing, and that's only from Q1 of 2025. Now, we believe that those numbers are underreported, that a lot of them are concealed, and that's just indicative of where these things occur, right? A lot of them occur out in international waters. They occur out in the Caribbean, and there's no quote unquote jurisdiction to criminally investigate this and enforce. So it leaves somebody without much of a roadmap of where to go. Let's presume something horrible happens right on land, your hometown, my hometown. We all know, okay, you go to the hospital and you call the cops, right? Who are the cops? Who are the cops at sea?
Right.
Who do you call? The FBI doesn't have jurisdiction, out in the middle of the ocean. They don't investigate these things. Now, they're supposed to be reported by the cruise lines, and we don't have a lot of confidence that they are. But it's just you're in a, I don't want to say the word, you're sort of like in an area of uncertainty. And when you're facing a completely life altering, devastating sexual assault, you want some certainty in the systems in which you're going to ask for help. And that is absent in when this occurs on a cruise. So it's the ripe kind of environment, right? You have crew members who are from other countries, from all over the world. They're not vetted with with what we would think would be, pretty detailed background investigation. So you have people who are not associated with our cultural norms of no means no, of consent has to be freely given, and so you combine that with inhibitions being down with alcohol, and you can see where a situation like this can go completely off the rails, and we've seen it happen a number of times, unfortunately, as well as my friends who practice in this line of work.
Yeah. So, when you were saying something, I was kind of like, really, like I think the average cruiser would assume, and rightfully so, that if there's a crime happens while at sea, that if they come back to a U.S. port, we're kind of told that the FBI is going to investigate. Once the ship comes in port, maybe someone would be, the offender would be detained and, of course, interviewed, and there'd be some type of investigation as best, as best could be done when the ship comes back, like to Port Everglades or something like that. And that you're telling that's not true?
No, I'm telling you, in an ideal world, that is what's supposed to happen. And it's supposed to happen under what's called the Cruise Vessel Security and Safety Act of 2010, where, the cruise ships are mandated to actually report these things to the FBI. But we know anecdotally from our own experience that it doesn't always happen, because it's not quote unquote logged as a sexual assault or as a rape, or it's just logged as something else. So it doesn't always happen. It should happen. Okay. Now there's also you bring up when you mention it comes into the U.S. port of call, you bring up an interesting point. Well, what about those ships and those itineraries that don't call upon the U.S.? Right. There is no FBI outside of the United States of America. Each country will have its own version of that. Good luck trying to navigate that that system, or systems, I should say. So the Cruise Vessel Security and Safety Act only applies to vessels that touch a U.S. port or embark or disembark from a U.S. port. But that only represents, not a minority, but I think it's like 19 million cruisers from the U.S., but the number is like 33 million worldwide this year, something coming up. So you're leaving a large number of these things without any sort of investigative recourse.
And so I've got to ask too, do you think that offenders, people that actually have these thoughts in their minds to offend and commit sexual assaults on women or other people, know, hey, you know what, the chance of this going somewhere is low? Maybe in all these different scenarios where the person might not say it because of shame, maybe because there's lax enforcement, because we're in the open sea and all this jurisdictional issues, that they go, you know what, I might get away with it this time. So it's
100%. Think about it. It's human nature, right? You're going to look for the, I'm not a criminal deviant, but I've studied, criminology and deviant behavior in the course of my practice throughout all these years. And you learn that, people will commit crimes if there's no deterrence, if there's an opportunity to commit it, and if there's the penal provisions, or the when you get caught, are not that severe. So think about it. These people are from, Panama, Philippines, Mexico, wherever, all over the world. And, a large time, what the analysis is, we believe, is that, okay, worst case scenario, they get sent back to their home country. What do they care, right? They're not going to be prosecuted in their home country. They know that. And so it's that opportunity. It's that, there's no deterrence. It's the fact that, they know there's, not likely going to be consequences. What are they going to do? Maybe lose their job? They'll just get on with another line or something else. And, this cycle does play over. But one of the things that I think drives some of this too, John, is, again, and I touched on it earlier, it's the cultural issues, right? Here in the U.S., you would think of employees doing this at a vacation resort or something. And while it happens, it's ultra rare. You don't really see it too much, because we've got an embedded culture of no means no, consent. You don't do these things. Now people get caught, it happens, but not to the point that it does when you're not a U.S. national. They just don't have our sense of right and wrong when it comes to these things. They think consent is something else. That it's sad to say it, but we operate completely differently.
Wow. And you were talking about their job. I think if they really cared about their job, they wouldn't even attempt to do anything like that.
Yeah, no, but it happens. And, like, I don't want to get too far afield on this, but, they're at sea for months on end on their contract. People have urges. I get it. And again, when you add alcohol to the equation, it changes behavior. It changes the risk people are willing to take. And it changes, sort of how they interact. So, alcohol is a big component to this, both on the victim side and also on the perpetrator side.
Right.
It cannot be discounted.
So the offender could rationalize something. Oh, she was asking for it, or whatever the scenario you want to come up with, right?
Yeah, there was a case not too long ago. I wasn't involved with it, but it was one where a young woman was aboard a Carnival cruise ship, and she was walking up a set of stairs in somewhere in the cruise ship, and she was pulled into a closet by a crew member, and he proceeded to rape her inside this storage closet. He claimed that it was consensual. She was intoxicated, and that was their sort of defense. Oh, she wanted it. Who wants it, from some stranger in a storage closet, on a cruise ship, from somebody she's met 1 second ago, right? I mean, it's offensive to take that position, but that's the position they take because it's the alcohol. The alcohol sort of, well, that's the way it appeared to me. So no, but that case actually went to trial here in Florida, and the cruise line was found liable for that to the tune of, I believe it was like $10.2 million for that particular, the facts in that particular case. Now, not all these cases go to trial, but this one did, I guess because of the positions that the cruise line took in its defense. And good for that woman to go get justice.
Yeah, and that's another of my questions. Are these offenders ever prosecuted? I mean, it's one thing if a civil trial comes about for damages, but are these actually offenders actually criminally prosecuted and held accountable, within that side of the law?
I can tell you in that case, they were not, and I don't know of any that actually have been. Sure, it's probably happened, but again, in that case, same set of facts that I just enunciated to you. It was reported to the FBI, and the FBI determined at that point it was consensual. Because, look, it's just a different animal. When you're on a cruise ship, and when sexual assault occurs, and when there's this he said, she said, and you throw in somebody's level of intoxication. Prosecutors like to prosecute crimes where they know they're going to get a conviction. That's a dirty little secret in, the criminal justice system. When you think that, prosecutors are there representing the people, and they'll take, if you feel wrong. No, they won't. Prosecutors want cases where they are almost guaranteed a conviction. I've run into that problem many times on other cases, other set of facts where, the facts to me are egregious, but the prosecutor, for whatever reason, says, well, we can't, we're not convinced that we could obtain a conviction. Like, convinced?
Yeah.
How about try, right? Win, lose, or draw. Give, put some pressure on somebody. Let that person have their day in court and at trial, and let this person be judged by their peers, but to not even try. And so that's sort of what is the backdrop of this, and why, a lot of these people, these offenders who do this stuff, feel emboldened to get away with it, because there's not a big track record of being prosecuted. It's swept, like I said, a lot of it's swept under the rug by the cruise lines. You always have that built-in defense of consent. You have the issues of alcohol, and Jesus, you just wanted to go on vacation with your family or your friends, and look what you're involved in. So many people, when they realize this, say, you know what, I just need to move on with my life. I can't deal with this. I can't deal with being called a liar. I can't deal with being judged. I can't deal with the system failing me. I can't deal with this. I totally get it, right? And it further compounds, I believe, the internal damage and the destruction of self.
Yeah.
When you don't have an advocate in either the employer, the cruise lines, the reporting agencies, the prosecutors. And so that's why invariably people turn to the civil justice system, for people like me to try and crack some skulls. And we do.
Yeah, and that was another my question. How is your office helping sexual assault victims when they come to you and deal with? Obviously, now we have more background on what they're dealing with. It's kind of like a bitter pill to swallow here, as far as having to deal with it. Even on your side, you only have so much to work with, right?
It is, but and we'll get into this in a little bit later when we start talking about the law. But I find, look, it's my job to try and help people. And what does that mean? It means I got to listen to them. I mean, I have to hear them. I got to hear their pain. I got to hear their story. I have to hear what they're saying, and they want a measure of justice. And if I am even remotely able to do that, and I am moved by someone's story, I'm going to do that. It's usually a very hard, arduous process to do it, because the law, is another thing that is a stumbling block here. But I've talked about this before. I feel like I've been put on this earth to try and do a certain thing, and that's to help certain people when they, are in a situation like this, or many others, where they need somebody to hear them and they want justice. And that's why I get up in the morning.
Yeah. So I'm going to zoom back a little bit, because just kind of thinking about this more as we're talking about it. I know in my understanding with civil law, obviously your case is stronger if you have a criminal conviction. Is that true?
Yes, but that's rare, where you actually have a criminal conviction to work with. Trying to think if I've ever had that happen. Not in a maritime setting like this, not on this type of issue. Maybe I've seen it before on like a regular case with, where somebody's killed by a drunk driver or something, or an accident or something like that. But in the context of cruising, I usually don't have anything like that to play with, unfortunately.
Yeah, my question was kind of like, because kind of going off what you were saying, I'm kind of like, oh, do you apply pressure to the local prosecutor to say, hey, can you re-examine the evidence here? Maybe do some, investigation through your office too, and try to present them with a tighter case to get a conviction, to build the civil side as well?
John, I wish I could tell you I was that persuasive a person. But as I mentioned before, prosecutors have one agenda. They have it's like, I don't know, it's like it's almost like a batting average, that they're protective of a certain
Yeah.
batting average. You know,
I've heard that actually.
that's
They
but
they
it's
they got a
true.
conviction rate, like they care about their conviction rate or something. Like I took
That's true.
100 cases and we got 100 convictions, and yeah, that people don't realize how. I mean, I've heard it. I've heard of that
Well,
myself.
that's true. So nothing I can say is ever, and I've tried. Nothing I can say has ever moved a prosecutor to actually bring forward charges when every fiber of my bone of my being says that needs to happen. They just do what they do, and it bothers the hell out of me because I subscribe to the I'm going to go off topic here for a minute, but I subscribe to the Wayne Gretzky philosophy. Somebody asked his dad in junior hockey, well, why does Wayne, shoot so many times? And Wayne's dad says, well, you can't score if you don't shoot.
Right.
So, I think that's the greatest line ever. You
Yeah.
can't score if you don't shoot the puck.
That's awesome.
You got to try. And what's the harm in trying? And that goes to not just our topic, but I'm going to get off topic here for a minute, but that goes for anything in life. What's the harm in trying?
Right. I think, and there's a lot of people that have, just to go down that rabbit hole a little bit, people have the fear, or people are trying to get a score, like you said, with the prosecutors, which, like we agree, it's probably a real thing. They want to, they're only going to get as long as it's guaranteed almost, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to take it to trial because they don't want to lose. And because of their, like I said, their batting average, so to speak. And I guess a lot of people as a whole too, they just don't want to, they're the fear of, they don't want to lose.
I'm just not wired that way.
Well, that's good. And yeah, but I also want to invite the audience. We haven't done this because me and you both kind of always jump in conversation. I love it. I want to, of course, welcome everybody. Please, if you're watching, please say hello. Please let us know what cruise you have coming. Please let think of the conversation. We'd love to hear your feedback live. This interactivity makes all these live streams so much. We know we're kind of covering some unique topics with Tom, but that's what makes this so special. We have several other ones here as well where we cover unique topics, and we kind of do a deep dive. Please go back and look on YouTube, Facebook, under the video section. We also have some reels and shorts, and we're hoping this will be a resource for the future. So whenever you're watching, please let us know when you're watching and leave a comment. We'd love to have that feedback. And we're going to have a live Q&A. So if you think of a legal question for Tom, or maybe a Tom Gretzky question, please put it down below. We'd love to have the interactivity. So thanks for that. And there's so much to talk about here. So you've mentioned it. You kind of alluded to who the offenders are, because there's so much up. When I think of a cruise, I think of couples, families, people traveling solo. And there's so many opportunities. I mean, like I said, some of the cruise lines, they laud how many bars they have on board, and there's drink packages, and people that might not consume a lot all of a sudden have an opportunity where they're consuming it. Why? Because they're on vacation, and so, like you said, it lets inhibitions down, but we also know that even the best people might act differently when they're inebriated, right? So, who are the offenders normally? Is it couples? Do things happen within couples? Is it strangers or?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things. It's normally, the offenders are normally, male crew members, between, a certain age of, say, I think it's about 20 to 40, male, of course. And that's your typical offender, which fits with the demographics for that type of crime. The victims are, one of the stats that we've pulled on this is 1/3 of the victims are minors. Think about that for a minute. Minors, children. 1/3 of the victims are minors. And again, I don't want to talk about some of the confidential cases that I've been involved in.
Of course,
it happens where you just think about it. In apply your knowledge of what happens on land-based activities to that occurs on the sea. Think of daycare, think of aftercare, childcare, gymnastics, coaching clinics, babysitters, things of that nature. So you will always see that there happens in the news every day, And there are um, activities like that on the cruise ship where children are left without a parent, where
Right.
left with a quote unquote staffer, where again out of mommy and daddy's view and supposedly thinking everything's great, and it has happened, and it's again that's every parent's worst nightmare. But one thing I want to touch on, John, that I think is worth discussing is some of the law in this area, right? Because ultimately, what I do is try and help people, but the only way I can do that is through the law and through the courts. And so you would think, right? Because talk to a layperson. Well, I was assaulted or raped by some crew member on some cruise ship. Okay, right? What do you want to do about that? You want to sue about it? Great, you're right. I'll ask you, is the cruise line responsible for that?
I don't know. I think the first thing is, well, usually the person's responsible, right?
Yeah. So there is no quote unquote strict liability for this. You would think that there should be, right? It's your employee.
I guess not to cut you up. My first thought was maybe, well, are they negligent? They didn't do a proper background check. Is that kind of
that's where this is going to go
okay.
because you don't win just because a crew member sexually assaulted or raped you. You don't win. If that is your theory, you lose. The case law has evolved to the point where, again, there is no strict liability for this, and the courts have held that act is outside the course and scope of that person's employment. Okay, yeah, I get that. They weren't hired to sexually assault people, right? It's outside the scope of their employment. So the law gives the employer immunity for that. If you do something that was not part of your job, right? That's not what you were hired to do. You're immune, unless you can prove that the employer was negligent. So this is not the legal process is such that you don't win if it happens to you. The cruise line doesn't have to pay. Okay. You must prove negligence. Okay. And that looks like negligent hiring, negligent retention, negligent supervision, negligent failure to warn, any sort of theory like that. Okay. The courts have evolved to allow some negligence counts to survive, motions to dismiss, motions for summary judgment, to hold the cruise line liable for that. And that was that theory that on that case that I told you about earlier, where Carnival was hit for, I think it was like $10 million. It was a sort of like a negligent supervision type of theory that well, they got these dark corridors and things of that nature, so these things should be monitored. Okay, a little thin, but you got to take what you can get. And if the court's not going to allow us to hold employers responsible when they do a crappy job, vetting these people and make it strict liability, then we have to come up with other ways to to skin the cat, as they say. So again, just to leave everybody with this is, you must prove your case through negligence. It is doable. The courts have allowed certain ways to do it, but you still have to meet evidentiary thresholds, right? You have to prove it up, and they don't always survive judicial review, as sad as that is to say. But now there's another thing I think we should talk about is, okay, we've talked about crew members assaulting people. Well, what about, if another cruise passenger gets drunk, whatever, and assaults somebody or sexually assaults somebody? That's a different animal, right? So the cruise lines are not responsible if another guest is accused of sexually assaulting, unless there's some again, theory of negligence that you could attach or attribute to that person. So, for example, this person was overserved alcohol and was harassing other women and was reported to, some of the security didn't do anything about it, such that he should have been watched or, told to go back to his cabin or whatever. That would be a viable negligence theory that could survive. But there's been some cases that have recently come down here in the 11th Circuit where cruise lines have been held not responsible when guest on guest sexual assault has occurred, in spite of their knowledge of this occurring, in spite of not doing anything about it. The theory in those cases, when we talk about a guest on guest, is you know the theory that at least some of my colleagues have tried is that, okay, well, you didn't tell us about the risk of sexual assaults that have occurred on cruise ships or that have occurred on your cruise ship before, or how many complaints you've gotten, so we can prepare ourselves. I get it. It's a good argument, but one that the courts have not found persuasive, unfortunately.
Does the amount of alcohol being served shipwide during that environment, obviously that's almost an issue in itself. There's not a warning for that. Is that something
That's always an issue. It's always an issue in all of these types of cases. It's just like nothing good ever happens with alcohol. I mean, I can't. Yeah, you'll have a nice time for your first two or three, but nothing good happens after that.
Yeah.
It's straight downhill after that. And yeah, then you're stuck with the consequences, and it's used against you, and you get judged, and it's just, and now you know why it's underreported when you have those factors at play.
Yeah, and so obviously underreporting, security protocols, and evidence failures. Did you want to touch on that as well?
Well, yeah, I think a couple of things to say is that under the Cruise Vessel Security and Safety Act, they're supposed to, there's supposed to be all sorts of video surveillance and recording on cruise ships now, and they're supposed to maintain those things, which is good. Again, they don't always do it. Vessels are supposed to be designed now with keyholes in the cabin doors. There's supposed to be electronic locks on the newer ships. There's supposed to be a sexual assault response and care program that the medical infirmary team is trained on. So if they need to collect DNA evidence, they have the ability and the training to do that. They're supposed to be stocked with what's it called, retroviral medications for post assault care. So you can make sure that you don't contract a sexually transmitted disease. Anything, again, according to the CVSSA Act, all information is supposed to be confidential. Cruise staff access to cabin rooms is supposed to be limited. So it's not everybody doesn't have a master key. It is only supposed to be select personnel. But as was pointed out to me, those things are not too hard to copy, and it has happened. One of the most tragic cases that I've ever seen was what was a joyous and amazing time. People were celebrating a wedding on board a cruise ship, and the bridesmaid had a couple of drinks, just like everybody else in the party, and went back to her cabin, and a crew member gained access to the cabin while she was sleeping in bed and sexually assaulted her. It was a horrific incident, and unfortunate, but these days things like that should occur with less regularity because of the key access control system in place, but it happens. But I would say in terms of safety and security, it goes back to some of our earlier conversations, is don't rely upon others to keep you safe and protect you. As nice as it is to be on vacation and let your hair down and think that, okay, I'm on vacation, I can breathe, right?
Yeah.
I can see a collective. Think about it. All of the and God bless women. I'm married to a fantastic one. They take care of the kids. They do the house. They work outside the home. Being a woman is a thankless job, and I get why, when they're on vacation, they just want to. There's that let go. There's that let go. There's a drink or two, and you just let go. And unfortunately, you can't. Not entirely on a cruise ship, because you have to watch it because these risks are there. And so I would say you can't rely on anybody else. Um, Big thing with the alcohol, do not accept a drink from anybody you don't know. Watch it be poured. Keep it with you at all times. If you have any hint that it has been out of your view for a second or two, or something, just a vibe, listen to that inner vibe. Okay, get another drink. Don't drink it. You don't want to get a bit spiky, because it, again, I sound like Mr. Doom and Gloom, but I've seen things that have happened, and so I'm just warning people. People want to ignore it, God bless them, but at least I've done my job.
Yeah, and you're kind of going towards one of my later questions. So if you don't mind, I'm going to you've covered a couple things, but because instantly what comes to mind is, what steps can solo travelers take, couples and families, because it's really three different scenarios, right? Big differences. Because numbers help, I imagine. If you have somebody traveling with you, you guys stick together. That helps. But there's so many. Solo traveling and solo cruising is a big thing nowadays. They even make several lines have smaller cabins in special sections just for solo travelers. And God love them. I mean, it's great. People want to get away. It's like you said, people let their hair down.
Yeah.
It is an escape type of vacation. You don't have to think about much. Everything's taken care of. I mean, it's beautiful. It's what I love about cruising too.
Yeah.
So if we want to kind of maybe start from the top.
Yeah. Well, you bring up a good topic.
What steps can they take to help prevent maybe being a victim?
Yeah. I think solo cruising is probably the more dangerous one, where you're I would guess most vulnerable. But the thing I would say is make friends fast. Travel in packs, of girls, ladies. Make a few fast friends, and have hey, listen, make a little pact with people. A little pinky promise. I'll watch you, you watch me.
Like a buddy, right?
We were. Well, I don't know. Did we lose you, John?
You still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah, we kind of lost you for a second there.
Okay.
But what I was saying was almost like a cruise buddy, so to speak.
Well, yeah, it's sort of like the rules when you go into an amusement park. Have the buddy system, right? Or when you go swimming, the buddy system. And so and first off, if you do that, A, it's for your own benefit, but B, it's going to help you along the cruise. You're just going to make friends faster that way, and you'll have a much more enjoyable time, all while protecting yourself at the same time. So for solo cruisers, I would say make fast friends with a couple of people in your peer group, and don't be afraid to have the conversation. Hey, I just don't want anything bad to happen. I've heard some bad stories. Can we, be our lookout buddies? And that's all. A little pinky promise. That's all you need.
Yeah.
For couples, again, the big thing with that is alcohol consumption. When spouses drink, eyes don't stay focused on where they should be, and you get distracted, and spouses get separated, and things happen. It's we had some crazy phone calls like that, but you just gotta be careful. So it's always an alcohol issue. We've seen with regard to couples. Husbands should always have their wives back. Boyfriends should always have their girlfriends back. Period. Full stop. There is no exception.
So you would tell a man, don't let yourself over drink. If you see that she's kind of indulging a little bit, maybe keep yourself in check. It's just not worth it, because if you do, even if you start having words, you need to keep yourself in check to make sure that she's taken care of and protected, right?
here's what I'm going to say, and this one goes out to the ladies. Okay, the cruise vacation is for you. It is not for the man. It is not for your husband. It is not for your boyfriend. Okay, if you are the one running the house, taking care of the children, working outside the home as well, the designated driver, John.
Yeah.
I still think it should apply on a cruise ship. Okay,
Right.
because I'm sorry, women are princesses, and they should be treated as such, and they should be watched out. There's a lot of wolves out there.
Right.
You got to watch your flock, and
Right.
if that means you don't get the drink or you only get one or two, well then, oh my God, you'll survive, right? Take care of your ladies, men.
Well, I'm glad you said it like that, because I kind of heard you going there, but you really said it clearly then.
I believe it, okay, and I mean it. So I want some fan mail from some ladies, not from the husbands. Now, and as far as families with kids, I'm gonna take a moment here to again address this, because children are a special sort of group. They have no defense mechanisms.
Right.
They are completely helpless and vulnerable. So I would say, don't just drop your children off. Be the annoying parent. Ask a whole bunch of questions, of these people. Look to see if there's cameras around. If there's no cameras, understand that there's no cameras, and you're taking that sort of risk. I would say make not too frequent, but some surprise stops back to the daycare center or wherever you're dropping your children off, and ask your children questions and listen to how they are responding at the end of the day. I've never seen it in my personal life, but hearing from clients and stories, there's an immediate shutdown, right? Something's happened. And so you don't, and people know their children. So if there's that immediate shutdown, if there's something wrong, ask questions, and go through that. I'm not going to give you this psychological questions to ask. They can certainly research them themselves, but pay attention to your children, because they report these things in different ways. Okay, they don't have the same life experience and knowledge to report these things the way an adult would. They manifest it differently. So, and don't be. I don't want to, again, because there's so many good people out there, but I'm just worried about the bad ones. But don't be enamored by the people who are in charge with taking care of your children. Don't be enamored by them. Okay, be inquisitive. Okay, don't get taken by somebody's personality. Just like you got to protect your children, but be mindful. Your job is not to be agreeable in those situations. Your job is to poke and prod. Okay.
Something that came to mind. Would you also recommend them, like the mother take the child, like a girl child, or even the father take the young boy child to the restroom, a public restroom on the ship? If they're by the pool, the baby's got to go to the bathroom, but they're able to go by themselves. Would you escort them, if maybe they're the same sex, to the bathroom?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, you don't leave doing number one or number two to anybody else. And if the child wets his pants, big deal. Okay. That's easy to fix. Think about it. What would you rather fix? Putting on a new pair of underwear, another diaper, or trying to deal with somebody's lifetime sexual trauma. So always escort your children. Don't leave them unescorted on a cruise ship. You just don't do it. Always have your eye on them, because bad things happen. And look, it could. I don't want to just say the sexual assault stuff, because other bad things can happen. They could. It's just, you don't want to do it. No vacation is worth, coming back to all sorts of pain and trauma and heartache. It's just not worth it. You can have a nice time, and you can have a nice time, together, measured. You're not letting your hair completely down, but that's what I would say on that.
I was going to think of another analogy. If me and you were to go to a strange city with our families, we would all pretty much stick together because we're strangers in a strange place, right? Would and you, like you said, you would incorporate that buddy system, where you're not going to go to the corner by yourself. You don't know where you're going. You don't know what anybody. You probably, even with a fellow guys, you probably would stick together naturally, right? So is it the same scenario in your mind? You're basically, you need to treat this as a strange city. So buddy up, take the families, like I said, the restrooms, different things, going back to the room. You don't send the child by themselves. You send, you buddy up, right?
John, and you said it perfectly. It is a strange city. Okay,
Right.
that's exactly what it is, and it's a moving city. It doesn't stay in the same place twice. There's no cops on
Right.
board. There's no quote law enforcement on board. There's no court system on board. Um, so and you have the help from places that do not have the same cultural values as you do. They were not brought up. I'm not trying to denigrate any particular population or any particular area of the country of the world, but you'd be naive to think that they think the same way we do. Okay,
Right.
and that naivety, or whatever that word is, I can't even say it, is what they prey on. Okay, that and alcohol consumption. Those two things are, look, a predator looks for the weakest prey.
Right.
And put yourself in that context. Who's the weakest prey? Somebody who's intoxicated, who doesn't have their faculties about them, who can't make perfect decisions, and somebody who's vulnerable, somebody who's trusting, somebody who thinks that they're the authority. And so, you know, again, I don't want to sound like a horrible person, but there are predators out there.
Right.
They're in every facet of every component of life. You cannot
Right.
escape it. There is no utopia where that doesn't exist. And so if you arm yourself with that knowledge beforehand, which I implore people to do, you will not be a statistic. Okay?
And
You won't.
the word I'm thinking is, you're telling people they need to be aware that the world is imperfect and there are these predators out there, not only in your neighborhoods, but at your workplaces, as far as the greater society, right? They're just out there, but also on vacation on a cruise ship. Is that what you're saying?
John, especially on vacation. Like, let's take ourselves out of this for a moment. From the cruise ship, how many times have we heard about a sexual assault occurring in the Dominican or Punta Cana or these places? What do these places have in common? They're vacation destinations, they're resorts, they're people, they're staffed by people who have different cultural values than you and I. Okay, and so that is the same set of circumstances that exist on a cruise ship, identical. One's on water, one's on a beach,
Right.
right? So if it happens there, and we know it happens on cruise ships, don't go into this thinking that, oh, this is just going to be the most relaxing, perfect vacation in the world. Most of the time it is. But what all I'm saying is, don't be a statistic, man.
Yeah.
Protect yourself.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, thank you for sharing that. And we've covered a lot, I tell you. Um, Trying to think of some more questions as far as these things. We've kind of gone down so many different things as far as who the aggressors are, the offenders, uh, who the victims are, and
Yeah.
it's many different types of people,
Well,
young and old. And
the the one thing that over sort of is over all of this is, think of it. You there is no there's no quote unquote, again, police force. There's no real enforceability on there. These ships are flagged in different countries. They are operated, you know, by people from all over the world. It's just an environment with enhanced risks, right? And so when you factor in the fact that there is no global police force over this, there's no global investigative force over this, there's no even, corporate, or corporate public recognition of this, instead of sweeping it under the rug. When you add in the cultural differences from with all the staff members, when you add in the alcohol and how people let their hair down a little bit on cruise vacations, you can see where some of this has happened with some regularity. So my my parting advice to people is enjoy your cruise, have a great time, buddy up if you're solo. Okay, if you're a man and you're going with your lady, let her have a nice time. You are there to guard your princess. Okay, that's it. Watch her, take care of her. Okay, your happiness is secondary. If you have a family with children, watch your kids. Be the annoying parent. Stay with your child pretty much all times when you can. If God forbid, you find yourself in a situation where the unthinkable happens, you immediately report it to the medical infirmary center, to the staff captain, and you demand that the FBI board the vessel at the next port in the U.S. Okay, those are the things that you are entitled to under the law. I can't promise you that the FBI will conduct a great investigation, or that they'll see things your way, or will want to take up the prosecution of this. But you demand those things, and you're better ahead than most other people. And you, again, I'm going to say it again, you demand justice. That is just the one thing that should never leave you. Always demand justice.
And even locally, you pretty much can demand a rape kit be used. It's the same type of thing. When you go to the infirmary, you just basically demand that DNA be.
Well, yeah, that's one of the things that the Cruise Vessels Security and Safety Act requires them to now have aboard, is that sort of evidence gathering kit with a medical professional who is trained to gather that information. And the other thing I would say too is also demand that the security camera footage be preserved. That will back you up. Yeah.
Yeah, I know many of the modern cruise ships have cameras everywhere now.
Oh, yeah, they're everywhere now. But they're everywhere. But they just conveniently don't retain them all the time. Okay.
Really?
Yeah. They're supposed to, but I can't tell you how many times I've seen this. It's like, well, no, we only have a policy of keeping it for a week or 10 days or 14 days, and then it's automatically written over. I'm like, really? In this age where everything's in the cloud, right? You're telling me you can't just hit the little save button, and this is all the footage from the cruise on this date, on that date. We don't need to erase these things. We're not using, VHS tapes anymore. Come on, let's be real about that.
Yeah, it was magic. It just disappeared. We don't know.
Yeah. How'd that happen?
Yeah. If we have any questions before our time's up here, please ask below. We'd love to have some feedback. We know this is a difficult subject, and I really, really appreciate Tom sharing this. Sincerity and passion that I think he brings to the conversation is really, really special. And I know this is going to be a good resource. We hope that no one ever needs Tom's services, and share those advice here towards the end if something does go wrong. But if they do, Tom, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
I would say just go onto our website, cruiseinjury.law, or cruiseinjury.law or usinjury.law. You can email me at tom@usinjury.law. Or call 305-424-2300. But email is usually the best way to get a hold of me, because it's always on me, and I can always respond to people right quick.
That's awesome. Well, I tell you, this has been a great, informative conversation as always with you, Tom. I'm going to recommend everybody, if you're watching this, if you enjoy the legal aspects to cruise law and cruise ships. Like I said, people aren't talking about this, so this is a great opportunity to go back. Please look at the previous episodes we've had here. They go into depth just like this one does, covering the passenger contract and several other different topics, and hopefully more in the future. But we're going to cover these things, and we really appreciate Tom being here. He is Tom Scolaro, and we thank him so much for his time. So until next time, we thank you so much. Have a good day, Tom.
Bye. Thank you, John. Appreciate
Bye-bye.
it.